name is Aaron. I'm going to be showing you my editing process on how I edit car photos. So I'm going to show you how I edited this photo to look like this. Now let's jump into Lightroom. I'm going to show you how I did this. Now I'm not going to be going through exactly a live editing, but I'm going to show you the breakdown of my initial edit. So right here I have the raw photo right here of the Audi S3. I took this photo around 4:30 on this nice road going down. Now I took this photo on the Sony A7 III with a Sony 50mm f1.8. Now let's jump into the edit right here. So on the right side, as you can see, the exposure panel, I only thing I did this was bring up the temperature, and that's it. Usually I'll be doing a lot more work up here, but on this edit I didn't have to. Jump down to the next panel, the tone curve. Let's turn this on. I brought down the shadows right here. I brought down the shadows to bring all the contrast into the image, and I left all the other RGB curves the same. Now into the HSL color panel. Let's turn this on. You can see the more sunset look that I'm going for coming in. Now let's jump into this. I left the red hue and the orange the same. I want to keep the colors looking the way they originally are throughout the whole edit. Now I'm going to pull the yellows more to the orange side and pull the greens more down to the yellow side. I'm going to leave everything else the same. Now inside the saturation panel, I'm going to want to push up the reds so I can bring out the highlights in the color inside the taillight some more. You can just click Z on your keyboard to zoom in and zoom out. And then I left the oranges the way they are. I left the yellows the way they are. I pulled down the greens and desaturated them to bring attention back to the vehicle. They're a bit poppy. For aquas, I pulled out the aquas and the blues, reason being why is because if you see how they were originally, there were lots of blues in the panel, in the back panels and on the windscreen of the car. So I just pulled those out. I pulled out the purple magenta as that manual way to pull out aberration in the whites and the highlights. I'm going to do this again inside the actual feature below. So for luminance, only thing I did was to raise the exposure of the greens in the image. Inside split toning, usually I'll be making the highlights an orange look by clicking on that button and clicking this pale orange. But the reason I'm doing this is because there are lots of highlights inside this image and it's going to be a bit too orange. So this only thing I'm going to do to this is I'm going to make the shadows alt blue. I'm going to click this box right here and I'm going to click this first pale blue and I'm going to just bring the saturation to 6. Now into detail, is something that's what people always forget, is that when you're sharpening an image, you want to choose what you want to sharpen. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option depending on what system you're on, and then I'm just going to go to the masking slider. I'm going to pick where I want and what I want to sharpen. Now wherever is white is where you're going to be sharpening. I'm going to bring my sharpening to 61. Go down, noise reduction, I left that. Lens correction, as I was saying before, I want to remove the chromatic aberration. There's a lot in the image because the 50mm f1.8 isn't the best side of it. So let's go to calibration. Let's turn it on. For the red primary, I brought down the hues to more of a red because as you can see inside the taillights, there's a bit orange initially. So I was pulling down the hue to really bring it back to a strong red. I left the green primary the same, and for the blue primary, I pulled it down to -16 to really work on the greens and to make it a bit more orange. Now let's jump into the real beef of my edit. Let's click M on your keyboard to open the graduated filter option, or you can click right here on your right panel. Now let's turn it on and see what I've done. So as you can see, it's getting really close to my final edit, color wise at least. Now on the first filter, I have 2 right here. I brought up the warmth to give motivated light, and a real warm sunset look that I was going for. That's all I did to it, just bring up the temperature. And for the last filter, I brought down the exposure. Reason being for doing this is that for most and for basically all of my road shots with cars, I darken the leading lines going to the actual subject so that it brings attention to the vehicle or to whatever the subject was. Now, as you can see, the image looks really nice, but what I like to do is that, especially for commercial work, is I want to bring out the details that are in the car and like even it out. And something else that I didn't do is that I didn't use a CPL filter. So as you can see, the windscreen is really blown out. So we're going to click K on your keyboard. It's going to open up the adjustment brush, and then it's going to turn on mine, which is what I did to it. I have two main ones right here. As you can see, it really exposes it evenly and brought up the details inside the back panel and inside the windscreen. Now if I hover over this, you can see that I made a very sharp selection of the back panel of where I want it to make brighter. Now what I did for this is that I went through the brush and I went through, to me, probably like half an hour per selection just to perfect it, and I brought up the whites to 24 and I brought down the sharpness a little bit. For the windscreen, because I didn't have a CPL filter, there's a lot of reflections and it's very blown out, so I brought down the highlight to try to balance it as much as I could, and I brought down the saturation to take out as much blues as I could. I also brought down the exposure a tad bit to really bring back as much detail as I could, as much as the raw file would let me. And this is the final edit right here that we have. Now I have one more photo I want to show you guys. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring the color from this photo. It's quite simple. Develop settings, click copy settings. We're going to unselect local brushes, sharpening, spot removal, transform. Now we're going to take out that and also take out noise reduction, click copy. I already have it pasted onto the image already. Then select the image that you want to select, that you want to copy it on. Right click, develop settings, go to paste settings, and then it's going to paste it onto it. Now right here you can see this is how the image would look with the colors, with the color editing from the first image. However, this is just for the colors. Now what you want to really do is to put in the motivated light and exposing yourself, because every image is lighted differently. So we're going to click M to open up the graduated filters. I'm going to enable mine. As you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 graduated filters on this. I'm going to go through them from bottom to top. As you can see, the bottom one is going to be the leading lines one I was talking about before. I want to bring the attention to the vehicle. I'm going to carry down the exposure and make it darker. Going up to the vehicle, I'm also going to pull down the saturation slider to pull out the blues that were inside the image, inside the shadows at least. On the second one, I was darkening the right side of the vehicle. Nothing major, just brought down the exposure out a bit. Now for this third one right here, going up, this is the motivated light one. So I brought up the warmth to about 44 and the exposure to about 1 to really show like a sun coming in harsh and it's warm and the day's ending. Now the two top ones are both darkening. Now you're gonna ask me, Aaron, why are you going to be darkening the sun that you made bright on purpose? Now let me show you. The reason I'm doing this is because when I didn't have these two on it, it's going to look very bright, and the white's going to be very coming out right here. It's going to be very bright and distracting from the actual image. So right here you can see him hover over it. I made this part darker. I brought down the exposure out a bit. Nothing major, but just enough that it pulled back the whites out a bit in the image, bringing back your attention to the vehicle and not the blinding light coming from the top part of the image. Click done. I'm going to jump into the adjustment brush where you can see me doing all to the specific exposing. Now this took a long time for me to edit. So click K. Going to enable this. As you can see, I have about 8 on this. So let's zoom in. You can click Z on the keyboard and hold down space to get the hand tool and drag, or you can go to your navigations panel and drag where you want to go. As you can see, I have my first tool right here. This one is just selecting the headlight to bring back detail in there. So I brought down the exposure and I raised the contrast to bring back the detail. I also pulled down the saturation. There's a bit purple from the aberration that was still not corrected. The second one is just basically the same thing. You can click Z again to pull out, or you can click fit. Now the next one is going to be the hood. So I have a selection of the hood, and right here, as you can see on the right side, I brought down the highlights, and that's it. The third one was just the selection for the right headlight. I just brought down the highlights for. Now for the windscreen, just click zoom on this out a bit. Let me choose my, probably want to carry it to about that. Now for the windscreen, hover over this. You're going to see that I'm in a selection of the windscreen alone using the brush tool. And what I did for this is that I brought down the exposure and I brought down the saturation. As you can really see, it looks like it's removing a lot of the reflections and a lot of the highlights. Thankfully, this raw file really had all the data in it. I did the same thing for the side windows right here. Again, this image took a long time to edit because I wanted these masking, I wanted these selections to be perfect. So for right here, I did the same thing. I brought down the exposure and the sharpness, and I brought down the saturation. Next thing is going to be the wheels. Now something that's overloaded inside these edits that you see online is that the wheels are just popping a bit too much. So I have a very bad selection on this, and click on it. I just brought up the shadows first, and then I brought up the contrast to really pull out that detail, but it's not anything really going crazy like that. So that's a bit too crazy, but yeah, that's not anything really too popping. And for the back wheel, I did the same thing. I couldn't do the same thing on both of these because that one's out of focus. On the back wheel, I did the same thing, but a little less strength in it. And that's it for the separate exposing like this. So this is the final image. Now I'm not going to go through in this video on how I would carry the photos into Photoshop and then do the final editing, but if you want to see a part 2 to this video, please let me know in the comments. Please share this video, like it, and subscribe. And if you guys like it, just tell me inside the comments, guys. Thank you for watching the video, guys. I'm gonna probably show some photos from the whole set that I have. I'm just gonna roll them out. So thank you guys, and take care.